Dear Sangha, dear Earth holders, dear Thai, this is Simona bowing again. I'm very, very happy to be with all of you. I am very, very excited to introduce today's facilitator, caretaking council member, Dharma teacher, John Bell, who I have had the privilege of knowing and being in Sangha and community with. So I will read John's bio for all of us. So John Bell, he, him, his, is a Plum Village Buddhist Dharma teacher who lives near Boston, Massachusetts. He is a founding staff and former vice president of Youth Build USA, an international nonprofit that provides learning, earning, and leadership opportunities to young people from low-income backgrounds. He is an author, lifelong social justice activist, international trainer, facilitator, father, and grandfather. His blog is beginwithin.info, which I will put in the chat for us. John lives in New England, where consciousness of climate justice issues is on the rise, a strong regional center for 350.org, the Green Justice Coalition, Sunrise, White People's Campaign, Massachusetts Climate Action Network, Greenpeace, and more. He lives on the traditional lands of the Wampanoag people. And with that, I will turn the space over to John. Again, we invite you to be in gallery view or to be in speaker view. Thank you for being here. Simona bowing out.
Good morning, everyone. Dear Thai, dear noble community, can you hear me okay? Good, okay. We're going to begin with a reading. This talk is called Practices for Navigating the Swirling Waters of Change. Some of you may have noticed there's a lot of swirling waters. I'd like to start with the reading by OI member Zung Bo Zung, who I think is a pediatrician in Vancouver, BC. You may have seen this posted on, for those of you on the OI list or otherwise. I think he captures this moment from a practice point of view beautifully. And then we'll have a short sitting. You might want to close your eyes, just take this as a meditation. I can't breathe, said George Floyd, the knee of 400 years of racism on his neck. I can't breathe, said the woman with fear in her eyes, her lungs attacked by coronavirus as she was put into the ventilator. I can't breathe, said the nurse exhausted after a long shift, sweating under the hot surgical mask and foggy goggles. I can't breathe, said the 138,000 dead Americans, a nation and a world in mourning. I can't breathe, said the skies choked in smoke from a planet on fire. I can't breathe, said the earth, suffocating under a blanket of carbon emissions. Breathe, my dear, said the Buddha of our time, reminding us of the way to love and healing and transformation. Breathe, my dear, said the beloved community, grieving and waking up together. Breathe, my dear, said Mother Earth, let my oceans and mountains and forests embrace you. Right now, when it seems so hard to breathe, right now, just breathe. Dear friends, dear noble community, dear Thai, it is good to be together this morning. It's, we sometimes take for granted our own sanghas, but really this is beautiful to practice together, to come together. I see we have people from Argentina, a couple from London that I can see, maybe other parts of the world. After the Dharma sharing, we'll have time to introduce ourselves and get a sense of our global Mahasangha. It's a beautiful day here in the Boston area, land of the Wampanoag, indigenous people. And you may have noticed that the bells of mindfulness are ringing quite loudly, the suffering all around the world, between the pandemic and the racial upheaval and the ongoing climate and the economy in free fall and the children not being able to go to school and our own personal situations. There's a lot. I wonder if anyone here is feeling that swirl, maybe confusion or upset or grief or anger, maybe numbness or I don't know what to do. Well, the good news is you're not alone in those feelings. There are billions of people around the world we're together with. This morning, I'd like to offer some practices that I've found useful in helping me through difficult times. And maybe they'll be helpful for you too. I've been with many of you in different retreats and talks. You may have heard me say some of these things before. I don't have very much to say because the practice is pretty simple to stay centered and focused and mindful. But even if you've heard them before, and I've heard them before, sometimes they're good renewals to remind us. So the first one is very elemental, and that is interbeing is the reality. Healing the wounds, the racial wounds, is not separate from healing our bodies or healing the earth's wounds or healing our inner child. It's all interconnected. And that sort of brings up this question that I sometimes ask, and maybe you do. Well, what should I do? How do I respond? Should I? And it gives rise to a lot of what I think are false choices. For instance, is it more important to end racial inequity, stop carbon emissions, eat a plant-based diet, heal my generational trauma, teach children mindfulness? You can see what I mean. These are false choices because since interbeing is reality, everything is interconnected. And if you just start one place and start pulling that proverbial thread, it's all connected. We look deeply enough and we'll get to all those things because of the interconnection. And that's helpful for me to understand. So we can start where we are. And know that if we look deeply and keep pulling the thread, those will get to everything. And we have to do it our way. Otherwise, we're not coming from our own authentic way of being. Which brings up another point. In whatever we do, whatever we choose to do, to use the title of John Kabat-Zinn's book, wherever you go, there you are, right? We bring ourselves to whatever we do. Actually, to however we be until we're pretty clear. But we'll stick with the doing part for a moment. We bring our talents, our gifts, our misperceptions, our ignorance, our lack of understanding, our what people might call neuroses, our hang-ups, our habit energies, our patterns, our gifts. All these things are in the mix and at play in whatever we do. Our particular place in the social hierarchy, the privileges that we have or don't have, the experiences we've had from being dipped in a thoroughly oppressive society that pits us against each other. All these things are in play in anything we do. And it's a wonderful opportunity to sit with and ask the question, well, who am I? Who's acting? What part of me is acting? And I always loved Ty's teaching about, you know, the piece of paper that he holds up and says, can you see the tree and the sunshine and the raindrops and the little insects underneath the trees and the farmer, that logger who cut down the tree and the person who milled the log and the people who worked at the paper factory and the oatmeal they made for breakfast. And he said, in this piece of paper is made up entirely of non-paper elements. Take any of them away and that paper wouldn't exist, wouldn't manifest. And likewise, I am made up entirely of non-John elements, as are you. And all of these things that we've ever experienced come in to make us up. So the practice question, who am I, is a deep, deep practice question. But I want to speak to one particular piece of who we are, which is our own pain and suffering. And of course, we know it's not our own. Our own is also collective. And there was a time when we were powerless. We were little children, and we saw things we could not stop. We knew they were a violation of right relationship somehow, but we were too little. People were bigger. We didn't have enough power, know-how, authority. And so we had to take that in. And unless we had a chance to heal it along the way, which most of us have not had a chance to do thoroughly enough, we carry these feelings of powerlessness into our adult life. And so we look at things like racism or climate change or poverty, and we say, it's just too big. I can't do it. It's way beyond me. And partly that is the result of having internalized those early hurts where we were powerless. So part of our liberation process is to really look at times when we had to give in, where we saw things, go back and look at them if need be, and say, okay, now I do have more power. I do have more knowledge. How could I be different? And stand with the little one inside, saying, okay, I'll be there with you as you face that situation. I'll intervene for you. I'll stop it. And allow the little child inside to grieve, to get mad if necessary, to feel the fear in that situation. And as we do that more and more, we will shed some of those feelings of powerlessness. And I think we don't talk about powerlessness feelings much. We're not powerless, but we often feel powerless to change our lives, to mend a relationship, and certainly to tackle the big things out there in the world, which are crying for us, which are opening themselves to us to address. And so I'm just encouraging you to, I know this is not easy work, and some of you have heard me talk about my own practice. I have a friend who's also a practitioner and happens to be a Unitarian Universalist minister also, but he's a longtime follower of Thai. And we get together every week. We've done this for 35 years. Every week, we split 90 minutes. I listen to him for 45 minutes. He listens to me for 45 minutes. We're not trying to change each other or cure each other. We're just providing a sacred space with deep listening and non-judgmental attitude, sort of like Buddha would listen to me. And in that space, I cry my heart out. I feel the fear that I couldn't get at before. And of course, over 35 years, I've developed such trust that there's nothing I can't look at because I know he's going to hold me. And this has been a tremendous aid to my personal liberation. The result of doing this and crying and releasing the those are outward signs of the release of inner emotional gunk that's all been piled up. And that's allowed me to think more clearly, I think, feel younger even as I age, love more deeply, be more in touch with my true nature. And it's been such a acceleration, I would say, of my own liberation process. So if you have people in your life, a person, a partner, a friend, you might want to experiment. Say, I heard this wild guy on a talk. He said he cries for 45 minutes a week and he feels good. Maybe we could try it for 5 minutes each. And, if that works well, equal time, just really keep track, because equal time tends to take out of it's not a situation where you're just chit-chatting or talking or even sharing deeply. The equal time says, I'm going to listen to you, and I'll know that I'll get a turn to be listened to by you. So that relieves me. I don't have to think about, well, when will I get a turn? When will he stop talking? Will he ever be aware that I'm here? Things like that begin to come up. So equal time really just equalizes it. It's a nice practice. So you might try 5 minutes each. If that seems good, try 10 minutes each and kind of build up and see what happens. So another fundamental practice, again, you're going to think this is just so trite, we've heard this a lot of times, is the contemplation of impermanence. We say these words, but this allows me to take a long view. For instance, around climate change, some of you may know this, but the biggest catastrophe that ever happened ecologically on this earth happened when an organism spread rapidly across the whole globe, gave off a noxious gas, destroyed almost all living life forms of that period. That happened 2.3 billion years ago. The organism was bacteria, and the gas it gave off was oxygen. And so that catastrophe paved the way for you and me and all the creatures that now exist. So everything is in constant transformation, constant change. The earth systems, our government, our bodies, our relationships. And so things do change. We're not in charge of these changes. We can observe them. The Dalai Lama was once asked what he thought of World War II. And he said, too soon to know. Yeah, so he's taking that long view. We never know the ripples. Sort of changes the longer perspective on little modern times. For instance, we in the United States have survived a good number of incompetent and corrupt presidents. Also, many of us have forgotten that most Black people in this country were Republicans from the time of Lincoln down through FDR. That seems odd, but that was true. Another example, when I was growing up, the biggest international fear that was held up to us was communism. Some of us older ones might remember that. Now, communism seems like a distant memory. And the young people today, if they know anything about it, they're actually, when they talk about socialism, they're more in favor of it. So things change. Things change even in our lifetimes dramatically. So contemplating impermanence is very helpful to me. The long view. We don't know how the story ends. Another one is directing loving kindness towards people whose views are different from my own. For instance, in the 2016 presidential election, in the Republican primary, there were maybe 17 or 18 candidates. And I once asked my local Sangha which Republican candidate they had most compassion for. And that was a challenge for a lot of people. You know, how are we, I think the love letter to the earth, Tai says that the earth holds all creatures, all beings without discrimination. That includes Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. It includes right-wing nationalists and Black Lives Matter folks. It includes Donald Trump. How many of us have sent loving kindness to our president? Wouldn't we like him to be happier? You know, wouldn't we like him to be more peaceful? How many of us have contemplated Mitch McConnell as a 5-year-old boy? He was an innocent boy at one point. Something had to happen to these men to make them the unhappy people that I think they are. And they deserve a lot of compassion. Does not mean that I, for one, want to see them continue in their roles and enact what I think are inhuman policies and practices. But it does mean that I don't exclude them from the circle of humanity. They are my brothers. And that's a good practice. It's hard to sit with that. But it does make me more understanding. And kind of related to this is noticing the patterns, what I call patterns of separation. Whenever I feel better than, worse than, judgmental of, critical of, disdainful of, dismissive of, threatened by, disliked by, whenever I feel that, I can pretty well be assured that I'm caught in a pattern of separation, my conditioning to feel separate. And I'm betting that you know that that's not a very pleasant place to be. You've experienced that separation. And so I've tried to use a Gatha practice a lot. And Gatha practices are very good because most of the time we don't spend our time on the cushion. And we're living life in the secular non-monastic world pretty much, dealing with the vicissitudes of life every day. And so we need guardrails, we need thoughtful directions to keep us headed towards our true home. We're already home, but since we've forgotten that part of waking up is cultivating the practices that help us remember that we're home. And so using gathas are very, very helpful in this respect. So there are 3 that I maintain. One is what Ty's given us. I vow to wake up from the delusion of separation. I vow to wake up from the delusion of separation. So am I feeling separate now? The other is affirming it. I'm intimately connected to everyone and everything. I'm intimately connected to everyone and everything. And one that I made up, some of you have heard me tell this, but I really like it. I was in an airport once, noticing that I was making up stories about the people, the passengers that I didn't know, how fat he was and why did she wear that hairdo and I wonder where she's going and why is that frown. You know how we do that? Total judgmental. We know nothing about them and we're making up these stories. So to counter, when I noticed that, I made up this gatha. I was in a strange airport with these strange people and I simply said, this is my home and these are my people. This is my home and these are my people. And right away, it changed my relationship to them, in my mind at least. I became more tender, more curious, more interested in them. And I maintain that quite a bit in large public places where I can feel that sense of separation coming up. And you can use any of these. They're not for sale, they're just for use by anybody. Or make up your own that fits your own particular way that you experience separation. Separation is a delusion, very powerful one, and needs our constant vigilance. to try to uh, counteract it, if you will. This morning, this is a little related, but I just want to share. This morning, I was, in my meditation, I was using the breathing in, this is a present moment, breathing out, this is a wonderful moment. And I thought, yeah, this is a present moment. So let's take that part first. What's the present moment? I'm just going to riff here a little bit, because the present moment doesn't exist as a static thing. It's constantly changing. Is it this moment, or this moment, or this moment, or this moment? Which moment is it? So there's this rolling experience of existence. We label it a moment, but it's actually in constant flux itself. And that's interesting, that there's no place, there's no security, there's no landing place in the present moment, because the present moment itself is constantly changing. And the second phrase, this is a wonderful moment. Well, what if I'm in pain? How do I say this is a wonderful moment? What if I'm upset? How do I say that's a wonderful moment? Well, I was thinking this morning, thank you for, if it's pain, thank you for showing me what I need to pay attention to. If it's anger, thank you for teaching me to look more deeply at what's causing me to be triggered here. If it's numbness, thank you for teaching me to do what it takes to become unnumb, to be back in touch. There's a way that I can, even if it's not a quote pleasant moment, it's not the moment where you'd think of this as a wonderful moment, actually, how could it not be other than a wonderful moment? Really, if we look at it from a long point of view, that being alive for 1 second, even in torture, is an amazing miracle. That's not an example that most of us kind of move towards, but breathing in, I'm aware this is the present moment. Breathing out, I'm aware this is a wonderful moment. Right here, this is a wonderful moment. Just contemplate that. Close your eyes for a moment. Invite yourself to say, I'm aware this is the present moment. I know this is a wonderful moment. Wonderful moment. Wonderful moment. However it is appearing right now, it's a wonderful moment. So, that might be something you can practice also. What's the, I guess I should watch my time here. Yeah, a couple more things. Those of you who have been to a monastery, at least in North America, the 3 monasteries in our tradition, what's over the altar? I'll show you. That sign. This is it. That's the teaching that Thai wants us to take in. This is it. No matter how we're thinking, this is it. What are we waiting for? Are we waiting for another better moment? Are we waiting for better words? Are you waiting for a better Dharma talk? This is it right now. And it's a wonderful moment. This it moment. It'll change. Now this moment is different. You're different. But this is a powerful teaching. This is it. When I can really get that, this is it. There's no, it's not after our session here that you can go out and have your Sunday afternoon. Maybe you'll get there, maybe you won't. But right now, this is our life. There's nothing more precious, beautiful, exciting, wondrous than this moment right here. And to really kind of like melt into that, to lean into that. Because the nice thing is we can have this, when we're aware, we can have this experience of this is a wonderful moment more and more times when we're aware like that. So if you would just smile, I'd like you just to try a big smile and say to yourself, this is it. There ain't no more. What you see was here before. It just took a little bit of doing to get here. And now everything is fine. Little song I made up decades ago. Okay, a couple more things, and then I'd like to show you a short video before we go into Dharma sharing groups. One is a set of practices that help me immensely are the 5 mindfulness trainings. They are really where the rubber meets the road, where we're trying to apply our meditation practice to the real world. And to live those more and more impeccably, more diligently, it's been very, very helpful. And they're interconnected. And I just want to read a little paragraph I wrote at some other talk I gave to illustrate this in a negative way, to show the connections. So for instance, let's say I'm angry and upset about the current political situation. If I am, I'm more likely to yell at my beloved, which I regret immediately. So I eat some junk food to cover up my bad feelings, which in turn helps to support the industrial food system, which contributes to the rates of obesity, heart disease, and depression, which drives up healthcare costs, which generate acrimonious, mean-spirited debate in the government about how to contain healthcare costs, a debate which makes me still more angry and upset. So this is not exactly a causal link, but I think you can see the connections here. So to practice kind speech, for instance, when I look at the political realm, sarcasm is very tempting. There's a lot to be sarcastic about. I used to use, I sometimes, and I realize that there's an edge of unkind speech in sarcasm. It's judgmentalism. It's separating myself from it. I used to use 2 Lily Tomlin quotes. She's a political comedian, for those of you who may not know. She says 2 things that I thought were very funny, and they have a certain reality. One is things are going to get a lot worse before they get worse. And the other is, I try to be cynical, but the way things are going, it's hard to keep up. And, you know, you can feel a certain truthfulness in these, right? And still, I realize, there's a little edge there that I don't really want to perpetuate. So I try to catch myself using sarcasm. It's just one little example of unkind speech. So really looking at these 5 mindfulness trainings ever deeper is a great practice. 2 more things. One is Thay's been very clear. One of the reasons that I was drawn to Thich Nhat Hanh's practice is because he's clear that meditation and action go together. His practice grew in the cauldron of the 2 wars in Vietnam, the French and then the American War. And he said to his followers that, you know, it's not sufficient to sit on your cushion and think that you can be free when the world is in flames. We have to go out and relieve suffering every day, continually, repetitively, and come back then to use the Sangha as a refuge. So the quote that I like, he says, once we see something needs to be done, action is necessary. Meditation and action go together. Otherwise, what is the point in seeing? So I really like the encouragement for us to use our practice in the real world, wherever we are, close and far, to relieve suffering, using our kind speech, our mindfulness trainings, our deep listening, our bringing peacefulness, our offering metta, our offering a long perspective of impermanence and things change, of standing up and saying no to that which is wrong, of undoing our own feelings of powerlessness in those situations so we can be more bold and fierce. In many of the temples, Buddhist temples in the Far East, I've not been, but I've heard that there are two statues or manifestations guarding the entrance to a temple. One is Avalokiteshvara or Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion. And the other is the fierce, not in you cannot enter here. You have to, I'm going to protect this sacred space from desecration, from unkind speech, from violence. And sometimes you have to be fierce about that, not just nice and kind. There's two go together. And the last thing is our Sangha. Thai's genius, I think, has been to realize that we can't do we can't handle the world's pain alone. Just can't. We need support. And he has a beautiful statement from, where is this? I'd like to read this to you. From Finding Our True Heritage, he says, to take refuge, first of all, is to take refuge in the island of ourselves, and then in the island of Sangha. These islands are communities of resistance. Resistance does not mean to oppose others. It means to protect ourselves, like staying inside to protect ourselves from the weather or the coronavirus in this case. We resist being destroyed by society's pollution, noise, unhappiness, harsh words, and negative behavior. If we do not take care of ourselves, we may get wounded and be unable to help others. If we join with others to build a Sangha that can nourish and protect us and resist society's destructiveness, we will be able to return home. Many years ago, I suggested that peace activists in the West establish communities of resistance, but true Sangha is always therapeutic. To return to our own body and mind is already a return to our roots, to our true home, to our true person. And with the support of the Sangha, we can do it. So change is upon us, and we don't quite know what this moment is in some way. Are we on the verge of a breakdown, or on the verge of a breakthrough, or maybe both? So these are both, and there's evidence, ample evidence for either. I think we're seeing at that. Suffering and hope are side by side. And I'd like to bring in, just to end with a 5-minute video of an interview of Van Jones. Some of you may have seen this. I actually posted it on the OI listserv. I was very touched. I've seen it like 4 or 5 times now, but each time it still moves me. And I think just as a way to segue into our Dharma sharing groups after this talk, I think it might be a beautiful way. So thank you very much for listening. And I hope some of what I shared was useful. And I'd like to try to now, Simona, I can share my screen.
Yes, John, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Optimize. Okay.
I'm glad that we're doing this week. If we had done this a week ago, I probably couldn't have been a part of it, just because there was so much heartbreak.
Dear friends, this was about a week or 10 days after the George Floyd murder.
I think the world saw something that's been happening in our country for centuries. It saw a black man lynched by a white man. That's what that was, that video. And it broke us. It broke the black community to watch something like that happen. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Starts calling out for his mother. His mother's been dead for years. 6 minutes, urinating on himself, begging for his life. 15 times, I can't breathe. Community screaming in horror. 8 minutes, 46 seconds. These videos have been a part of American life now for almost 7, 8 years. It was always, oh, well, it was a quick decision and cops got to defend himself. He was talking back. He was fighting back. What do you want? What do you expect? You can't second guess the police. But this one, filmed from beginning to end, stunned the world. And for all of the times that we have been lynched, we've never had a situation where 1 billion people could see it all at the same time on their smartphones. And it shoved a piece of glass into the eyeball of everybody on the planet, and it hurt them. People couldn't sleep having seen it. They couldn't rest. And if we had tried to have this conversation a week ago, we probably couldn't have it. But a miracle is taking place. A miracle is taking place. A continent of new common ground has emerged from beneath the waves, where there are 20, 30, 40 million white Americans saying racism is real, more real than I thought. There's something wrong with our justice system. It's more broken than I knew. What can I do about it? As an African American man, it's a miracle. It's all I've wanted. It's just an acknowledgement that what is happening, and that we need to do something about it. And now we're in the middle of something we don't know what it is. We don't even have a name for it. The civil rights movement wasn't called the civil rights movement at the beginning. At first, it was just people trying to fix a problem, and later on, they called it the civil rights movement. We don't know what this is. NASCAR says they're not going to let Confederate flags fly anymore. The NFL is apologizing for not supporting Colin Kaepernick's peaceful protests years ago when he was trying to call attention to this. You have people, corporations across the world saying Black Lives Matter. What is this? We don't know what to call this. 1964, they called it Freedom Summer when those students went south to register voters. Some were killed, some were beaten, but they changed history. But they didn't call it Freedom Summer then. They called it, it was 2 years later when a book came out called Freedom Summer. They didn't know they were in Freedom Summer. So we're in some awakening, some great awakening, where much more is possible than we had dared to hope for. Somebody killed a black man, and everybody cares. It's a miracle. It's never happened. It's never happened. Somebody killed a black man, and everybody cares. I wish my parents were here to see this.
This is a poem by Ty. Dear friends, it's called The Good News. They don't publish the good news. The good news is published by us. We have a special edition every moment, and we need you to read it. The good news is that you are alive, and the linden tree is still there, standing firm after the harsh winter. The good news is that you have wonderful eyes, and your arms are available. Hugging is possible, at least at some point in the future. They only print what is wrong. Look at each of our special editions. We always offer the things that are not wrong. We want you to benefit from them and help protect them. The dandelion is there by the sidewalk, smiling its wondrous smile, singing the song of eternity. Listen, you have ears that can hear. Bow your head, listen to it. Leave behind the world of sorrow and preoccupation and get free. The latest good news is that you can do it. I'll invite the bell. And may the fruit of our practice benefit all being and the earth and all suffering beings. Thank you, everyone.